your initial journey was, yeah?
So my initial journey was a speculator. I came in around 2021 and I was actually trading Clonex, which at the time I was also, flipping sneakers. And I found a connection to the art. I related to the Nike affiliation and Murakami specifically. And I thought it was this beautiful blend of things.
How do you end up flipping sneakers, if I may ask? Sorry, I've never.
No, so that's actually funny. Nobody's asked me this, and it's a great question. I grew up in kind of a lower middle class family, and believe it or not, I'm 43. So I grew up watching Michael Jordan play. And in my corporate career, I inadvertently had some adjacency to StockX and got fascinated with this concept of people buying sneakers and then flipping them. And because I came from this like lower middle class family, I never actually had them. I always wanted Jordans, but it was like I remember touring StockX's facility, and one of the authenticators literally stuck his nose into a sneaker and is like, "You can smell if they're authentic." And it was the most bizarre thing to me at the time. I was like, "Yo, you're like just swelling." Like it was kind of it felt like a little fetishy, but I was like, "This is like their job," and they took it seriously.
For somebody who's kind of an idiot, what is StockX? Is that where they trade secondary sneakers?
Yeah,
Or
it's like a secondary marketplace.
that's I've been I've been to the one in Miami. They basically wrap them up into plastic,
Plastic.
and and you can just buy random collectible sneakers there, right?
Correct.
Is
And
that
so this is like at scale, like the mass production of like sneaker authentication. I mean, people try to replicate them because there was at the time there was like financial incentive, right? Like you buy it for 200 and some of these were selling for like multiple hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And so I became fascinated with it and I found a pair of sneakers that I really wanted. And I naively was like, "Oh, it's $200. I'll go buy it." Well, they weren't available because it was like this like rare sneaker, and they were actually selling for $2,000, and I refused to spend $2,000 on a pair of sneakers. So I started. Uh, my thing is like I wanted to collect the sneakers. I didn't have access to as a kid, but my goal was never to pay more than retail because it just felt silly to spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds or thousands of dollars on sneakers. So I did that. So I just got into it was like my little fun hack of being able to do it. And that led me to NFTs. And I had a pretty good position in Clonex. The floor shot up from like 6 ETH. And this was like ETH was like 4K, by the way. Right. Like and they shot up to I think it was like 18 or 20 ETH. And I just remember being like, hey, $1,000 for one of these things doesn't feel sustainable. They airdropped, back when airdrops were the thing, some like little
I
box.
had Clonex as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and the boxes were selling for 5 ETH, and I just, like, liquidated everything. I was like, like, it didn't feel like $80,000 is, like, that's a lot of money, like, and then just to be, like, throwing it around, so I liquidated everything, and at the time, the first NFT I've ever bought was the Proof, Pass, which most people don't know what Proof is right now, but back in 2021, it was, like, the premier spot to go and hang out. It was, like, associated with Kevin Rose before he left the space and there was just this like high accumulation of like really big brained individuals that was
What
incredible.
do you think about Proof right now in like April to 2026?
I mean, it's non-existent in my opinion. Like there's a Yuga bottom for reference a year and a half ago, and there's promises of some things. My hope is that, Yuga sold off some assets. Either they develop it or I think they've called out most of the X-Proof staff. They either, like, repurpose it, there was something brilliant about Proof and finding, like just like they did with Moonbirds, if you find the right founder, like, somebody who's gonna, like, lean into the culture and the creation of a special space, I hope that's how it goes. I mean, I still hold my Proof Pass. I'm like this is probably the worst financial decision of my life, but if you look at it just from a pure financial perspective, the community and the network and the people I was able to connect with was just absolutely brilliant, and I think that there's something really special about Web3 and being able to connect regardless of geographic borders. I mean, here we are having a conversation and we all reside in different locations, right? Like this is the brilliance of Web3 and to in the absence of it, I haven't found many other communities that have really tapped into it like Proof had. So I hope, I hold on to my past because I'm like willfully hoping that, I'm not tax loss harvesting that bad boy because I'm hoping that there's like something, a spinoff. But I mean, as of today, I'm not privy to anything and it feels like it's dead on the vine for the time being.
And from like sneakers collecting, like PFP passes, to your love for generative art and going like into funding, like collecting, investment, creating a platform, were you collecting art before all of that, or?
So I was collecting art. This is a funny story. I lived in Los Angeles at the time and I had found a way I love photography. Photography was my first love. I actually, in my garage, I set up a spare darkroom. So I'd actually like dodge and burn old like black and white photography. Like I couldn't afford it, but I'd like go rent a Hasselblad, medium format, and I'd take landscape photographs and like develop them myself. So Ansel Adams was like the photographer that I just like absolutely enamored with. So I'd actually buy Ansel Adams prints at like wholesale, for lack of better terms, and I'd work with some galleries in Beverly Hills and have them buy them and place them and all that stuff. I couldn't afford, whatever at the time, 10 grand for these Ansel Adams prints, but I could afford to like carry the cost for a month. So I'd always have Ansel Adams prints on my wall at home, but it was really about churning them. And so it was my way of being able to observe and like cherish the art and like appreciate the beauty of them without like the overhead, because at the time I couldn't afford it. So my love for art went way, way, way back. And I'll tell you about like one of the experiences I had when I was 10, a little bit later on, and how it just like, like I said, I'm 43 and, 30 plus years later, I'm thinking about this moment because art to me is like a very emotional thing. Like there's just something, it's hard to contain it. It's so visceral and like at the core of us human beings. I think it taps into something in a world of AI that's like very transactional or like very expedient. Like art is something that, in my opinion, slows people down and allows you to like really feel human. And it's something we should really champion a little bit more. To go from PFPs to art collecting, I was sitting on a bag of ETH, very, candidly, from all the Clone X sales. And when I was in Proof, I asked somebody around, what should I be looking at? And somebody said art. And then I came up and said the Chromie Squiggle. And I did a deep dive into the Squiggle and I fell in love with not only like Eric as a human being, the simplicity of the Squiggle, but also the like beauty of generative art. Was red pilled from that point forward when it came to generative art. There was just something so brilliant about an artist creating parameters and kind of letting the universe dictate the output and having the confidence in an algorithm that like set these clear lines of rules of engagement, but then the blockchain and the co-curation of the minter to allow for this beauty to come out of it. And the Squiggle in particular was like this beautiful blend of metadata that was like, it gave clear rails to look at, and guidelines, but then you actually had to like enjoy the collection and look at the art to like then develop like a deeper love for it. And there was like things that are now like traits that the Squiggle DAO co-curated that I was like collecting around because there were like little nuances that I had seen with my eye, but it wasn't in the metadata. And that just, like I said, it was like this brilliant rabbit hole that I became obsessed with generative art and squiggles. And I realized that even though the Clone X play was financially very beneficial, it wasn't where my passion lied, and it wasn't about like flipping PFPs. I was never the cool kid, so to speak. So like being part of a community and at the forefront of that was never my goal, but it was to be, into the art world. And the thing about blockchain art that became a no-brainer to me and still one of the foundations of some of my beliefs is like on-chain provenance is like there, the transferability of things, and then the lack of gated entry into the space. I mean, we saw the rise of a lot of like amazing talent, yourself included, right? Where you could put art out into into the Twitter sphere or the universe, so to speak, and let communities and collectors rally around it because you weren't relying on somebody in a gallery or a major museum. And you saw the rise of, Dmitry Cherniak with Ringers and Tyler Hobbs with Fidenza, and you just saw Matt Cain with Gazers, Harvey with Fontana. there was this like enthusiasm that started to bubble up around generative art and art in general, right? I'm focusing on generative, but these communities it was just so intoxicating to me, and I had a really deep conviction in the blockchain art because it was so intuitive to me. I found Bitcoin pretty early, and it was very, and I was banging my head against the wall, like, how come nobody else sees this? I feel like blockchain art is the same thing. And it's the analogy I'm using is, to me, blockchain art is the equivalent of Bitcoin in 2013. It's so obvious. It makes a ton of sense. Just hasn't hit the adoption curve side of things yet, but given enough time, I feel like it will. Early blockchain art, especially like pre-AI generative art, I think is just going to be like fundamental to the narrative moving forward.
And what kind of catalyst do you think would make digital art more mainstream? Well, if
That's a
I
great
don't know,
question.
because I remember at the back in the days, like early Bitcoin, you had. I remember like one number struck me. There was like 3.5 billion people who were unbanked. And one of the main theses was like, yeah, I mean, just imagine like 20 million, 21 million Bitcoin, 3.5 billion unbanked people. What if all these people start to use Bitcoin instead of Western Union? To me, that was like an obvious thesis. I'm thinking if you have any other insights specifically about digital art in 2026, where most of the market has gone away. We still have, of course, like people like you and some active collectors on some platforms. But I'm not sure we have some like more obvious thesis right now about what could propel digital art in the future.
Personally, I think that there's two paths. Both are true, and I think both are parallel paths, well, completely different strategies. I look at it as something like with mass adoption, right? Snowfro had this vision, and he's been pretty public about it, where you could go into IKEA and print a generative poster for $20 and it prints out, it taps into the algorithm. I think that sort of mass adoption, whether people realize that they're buying blockchain art or if there's like some sort of key component associated with it, it's going to onboard people. And similar to like me, how I came for speculation and I stayed for the art, somebody will have, that when you go out on the adoption curve, getting more people on board is critical. Whether or not they can afford, $100,000 X copy or not is a whole nother issue. But I think that sort of moment in my brain, the analogy I make is kind of similar to like what Instagram did for like photography and visual arts, where not everybody has to be an Ansel Adams, or a Kath Samard, but like you're able to like share art in a way that people are emotionally tied to. There's going to be a bunch of slop, don't get me wrong, but it kind of normalized the sharing of it. And I think that when artists are able to not only monetize, but like have a deep expansion into like the greater public, whether it's through IKEA or some other traditional aspect, I think that that's going to be critical. I often say like, I'll know Will made it when my grandma says like, I minted something, right? Like when my grandma came to me and she's like, I'm on Facebook. And I was like, oh Jesus, like, like we're way past the adoption curve. Right. But then I think the other side of it is, I did have the pleasure of interviewing Raoul Pal. It's probably like 2.5 years ago now. And I do think that, once, his core belief is we're at a $2 trillion asset for crypto right now. It gets to 100 trillion at some point. And his point was like, there's going to be a huge accumulation of wealth. I'm not smart enough to tell you when it is, but when that happens, I think that it will bring a lot of eyes and attention to art, because you're going to start to see these like massive sales, and those start creating headlines. And then just like anything else that's speculative, right? Whether it's sneakers, Pokemon cards, or anything, there's going to be a high level of attention that people go, what is this? Why am I not doing it? Or, I mean, we've seen this with like the X copy last selfie, right? Arguably in my opinion, this is my personal grail, the grail of grails in my opinion, but arguably one of the best pieces of art in blockchain art right now. And it's an edition of 10. And they're starting to get into like diamond-handed individuals, and the incremental amount to release a piece from a diamond-handed collector is starting to hit that exit velocity of really, really expensive. I mean, you saw like there was a $500,000 sale, then 7, then 9, then 1 million, then 1.3, and then it jumped to like 3.4. Like, so these headlines and things over a long enough duration are going to get to be just attention seeking. And we had Beeple's $69 million sale, and I think that was like, I'm not saying that instigated the 2020 craze, but these headlines over a long enough duration people start to ask why is this always in the headline? Why is it important? How do I look into it? And I think that those two parallel paths of like the increased sales and the mass adoption through some visionaries, I think will be kind of the two red pills that get us to the point of.
I wanted to ask, you said before corporate, you still working in the corporate, or is 8NAP 100%?
8NAP's my thing. I left
Oh, nice.
I left corporate America, even though I had all the clothes still left over from corporate America, so I still like to
That's
dress
why
up.
I'm asking.
Yeah. No, I left corporate America to go full-time 8NAP because
Where are you based in America?
the Pacific Northwest, so West Coast.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
And for me, it was, so I ran a podcast for a little bit called Collector's Corner that focused on deep dives into long form generative art, really, really dense content. But we found a niche of like really highly committed collectors. I mean, we do a 2-hour long deep dive into like a generative art, whether it was like screens by TLP or Fidenzas, gazers, like we were going deep into these collections, and I got to know the artists really well. We started inviting artists on. TLP was our first one. And as we were going through it, like I just found a deep love for the artists documenting their stories real time about like collections and what like each of the traits meant, the corners of the algo that maybe were obvious or non-obvious to collectors, and pulling that information out. And then getting to know the artist, I really felt that there was a need for a platform that had more of an attention towards their interests rather than being extractive or transactional. Well, here we are, April 2026, and the last 6 to 12 months has been really difficult for platforms. You've seen a couple of them go away, but I felt that in order to like give 8NAP my all, like this is like the perfect blend of 20 years of corporate business building and aligning with my passion. And that's what 8NAP is. I always say it's a 20-year project for me. It's not a value extraction. I haven't taken any salary. Every dollar has gone back into the business to grow it. Because my hope is at the end of that 20 years, I have 3 boys. One of them, I've sparked enough interest to take the reins and keep carrying it on. So, I mean, I just absolutely adore the space. The people are amazing. I just think it's an insane moment in time where we're at the forefront of technology, but also accessibility to artists. I mean, it's still bizarre to me that I can DM, and usually within 1 or 2 degrees of separation, I'm getting a DM back. And it's just like, it's brilliant. And I encourage everybody to DM their favorite artist, even if it's just, how's it going?
Regarding 8NAP, what makes it unique as a platform, but also I think you go beyond a platform, as in transaction and curation. You go also in terms of artist service support. And could you let us know about, in the space of, you mentioned art blogs, you mentioned fellowship. I'm sure you have a very unique positioning, and could you describe that?
So for 18 months, I battled the need to start a platform because there was a lot of platforms. And I always say, like, I don't want to compete with Art Blocks or Fellowship. I just want to pick up where they left off. And so the brand for 8NAP is an artist accelerator, and it's mirrored my corporate career. And so what I'm wanting to do is take or help artists that may feel like they're at that plateau moment and give them the skill set to help them level up to the next point in their career. So that's the hands-on approach. It's unscalable, but I love it. It's the part I love, being able to have highly curated, a lot of touch points in the process. But one of the other parts that I felt were unique is I have an auction mechanism. I mean, you saw this with your release, where when you put the pieces out to auction, you find fair market value and you're able to get a higher amount of primary. I thought it was like a really interesting concept. You saw that with Delta Sauce's issues that we released. We put a bunch of pieces, 90 pieces, into individual auctions, and we ended up recognizing roughly, I think it was like 150% more revenue on those 90 pieces because of the individualized auction component. And I looked at it as almost like a way to spread out revenue accumulation. So it just wasn't this huge taxable event, but rather we were able to create like a sustainable revenue flow for the artists that not only allowed for like price accumulation, but it was like an annuity, and for lack of better terms, where they were able to tap into liquidity to create more of that level revenue stream and create a lifestyle predicated on that level of engagement. So we're getting innovative on the release structures. I don't want to bore everybody and the listeners with all of it, but I'm trying to pull from my life experiences and create.
Your corporate life, what's the connect? What did you do there? Because it seems like you're building the platform with an influence of something.
Yeah, I mean, the benefit I have is I'm a little bit older. I'm not just a cash grabby. I built multi-billion-dollar businesses alongside of other people in corporate real estate. So like it was, my comfort zone was everything from like concept and Excel spreadsheets to the contract. Like I didn't actually do the construction, but like a lot of the numbers and the front end stuff was my forte. So, again, I had the benefit of being in the room with some really brilliant people that if you quantify success by dollars in the bank, they were very, very, very successful. And
So
just to like,
you were in real estate development before?
yes, yeah, yeah. But like
Oh,
for
got it.
major, like I didn't own anything. I just worked for major developers. And to be able to
Got
sit
it.
alongside them and understand like how their brains worked, whether it was like from curation of spaces and experiences to, how they found ways to pay themselves by, you know, owning businesses that they put into the structures they were building. It's just like all of these things were data points of how the successful maintain their success and grow their influence, and how it's done on it's not like we go out to the market, we get all this money, and then like it was done on a long-term sustainable timeline. A lot of the developments I looked at or I was building were multi-billion-dollar places, and it'd take, everything from concept to execution was like 6-7 years. And when you have that sort of time horizon, think differently, and it allows for like strategic implementation, like really thoughtful deployment of time, and not just this value extraction. Yeah. And I think that like the having life's experience and integrating it into 8NAP has been like really, I look back on, it's not just like the monetary side of things. As I got older, I was grateful for the people who took me under their wing and mentored me. And conversely, I derive most of my fulfillment from a corporate career, not in making more money, but rather mentoring some of the younger staff upwards. And that's where, for 8NAP, it's very much aligned with that value that I have, which is not that I need a mentor, but like really supporting artists in their journey and allowing for them to like grow as individuals and really find some full potential just at an accelerated rate, right? Like
What does 8NAP stand for?
so 8 is my lucky number. So very superficial there. But N stands for, I wanted to have like a core values. N is for noble. I wanted to have a noble approach to the space because I felt that at the time, some of the platforms were transactional. A is for abundance. So I wanted to create an abundance for everybody who was involved with 8NAP, not only from an experiential or financial perspective, but educational and intellectual perspective. And then P is prosperity. So anyone involved with 8NAP would come out of it a little bit more prosperous than when they came into it.
That's a very different branding. But the one thing that I wanted to ask you is like somebody who's also dabbled with platforms and things like this and art projects together with Jean-Jacques most of the time. There's a funny dynamic of like old gatekeepers galleries versus open platforms versus curated platforms. It's like, are you considering yourself to be a gallery? Are you building a platform? Like those lines are so mixed up.
Yeah.
What do you think? Where does the future lie,
I'm
and
a
where are you
heavily
going with
curated
it?
I'm a heavily curated platform. I have no interest in a physical space. We kind of teased it off camera, but
So an online gallery can
yep.
be,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and want to run a very lean operation. So having a physical space to me I love it, just for the record. It's just not the business I want to be in. And I think that there's a lot of people doing great work. Like, you could see Heft and a few others like starting to like really emerge as like pioneering this space. So for me, it's more about partnering with people whose passion lie in a physical space. It's just not where my passion lies. And I don't want to go out on a limb and try to like create a space that I'm not like I wake up every day like freaking excited. Like I love to hit the ground running. I love engaging with artists and I don't want the stress of a physical space. That's just me. I know it would stress me out. It may not stress others out, but this is where like for me the beauty of Web3 is all about partnerships, collaborations. So I teased it off camera, but we're gonna announce hopefully here in April a partnership with an institution down in Mexico City, and that to me is like where I want to be is like partnering with galleries, partnering with institutions, so I can keep it fresh and exciting, and like really lean into this concept of the institutions enthusiasm, and I want to like build alongside them and not have like the anchors. And I don't like the concept of an open platform for a couple reasons. Because of the brand, as I just outlined with 8NAP, the noble abundance prosperity, I want it to be representative of my value system, and I want to support the artists who are very much aligned with that. Now, it's also not scalable, right? Like my DMs are flooded with inquiries and I can't release everything with everybody, but I can tell you all the releases that are on 8NAP come with a brilliant set of stories, a brilliant set of passions, and I'm proud of everything that resides there. And I think that that's the foundation. And my hope is that that level of enthusiasm is contagious to anybody who engages with us. And while I may not be the biggest, my vision is to have one of the heavier impacts on the space because people are connected to it. And, one thing I haven't said publicly, but I'll share here for the first time is I'm a firm believer in IRL component of this, right? Like it's nice that geographic boundaries don't exist. So with these museum partnerships, we're going to have an IRL component that's predicated around like art and education and experiences. So a lot of this I've partnered, and again, this isn't public. I should, but I partnered with like Diego Rivera's family on this one. And so we're gonna do a lot of like education around like Diego, his art, the culture, the experience in Mexico City and the influence he had on the local Mexican culture and awareness, and how he was a purveyor of, we'll call it Mexican history, and do that in addition to like a big exhibition and stuff. Like I think it's important for us to like not only embrace blockchain art, but to also like acknowledge the people who came before us and allowed for us to have this opportunity.
You mentioned you've been working on a project with institutions, and from an institutional standpoint, how do they perceive digital art, and what do you think we should do differently to connect better with institutions?
Basel, Miami, which 010, what the artist and Eli did there is like, I think it's going to be looked back as one of these pivotal moments. It gave me something to point back to about how we can take the art not just on the screens and the walls and like bring them into like the physical realm and still integrate with like blockchain for like verifiability, provenance, and that sort of thing. And it's really, really transformed the way I think about blockchain art and the engagement and how we, these institutions, they're always looking for something different, but finding a way for them to create an experiential item with art on an ongoing basis is something that like I'm really, really leaning into. And, with this exhibition, we're going to have some like really, really fun stuff that's going to take what I like to say our art off of the screens and into the real world. And now I'm gonna have like various things. Like for context, I partner with like about 25 different artists that are going to range from like long form projects to, editions.
Maybe as a way to wrap up this interview, as we have artists listening to us, we also have collectors are listening to us. What kind of advice would you give to a young artist starting today? What kind of advice would you give to a digital art collector or an art collector who would like to start collecting digital art?
For the collector, I'd say collect what you love. I know it's cliche, but like if you think about this, we used the last selfie earlier. I think those minted for like $100. Like I don't think anybody minted that thinking it was going to be a $3.4 million sale at any point. They collected them because they loved them. They created, and again, it's not all about finances. I just use finances as a way to quantify things and create relatable touch points. You know, in that process of creating relatable art, the collectors form these self-collective communities around advocacy for it. So if you find an artist that you love, whether you connect with their aesthetic, them as human beings, or whatever reason, my challenge to each collector is go and evangelize the people that you care about in a way that's very authentic to yourself, in a non-financial way. Like, don't be like, oh, come pump my bags, but do it in an authentic way. Like, I think you're starting to see, I'm like obsessed with Modest right now because there's a group of collectors self-organizing around his work or their work in a way that's very, very admirable. And it's being done in a very authentic fashion without like this desire to have like their bags go up. I think that that's, as a collector, that is like one of the single greatest superpowers you have in this space. Is like, yes, you may not have the greatest reach like Cosimo or Bat Soup Yum, but you know, you can create a community around your artist and evangelize their work in a way that like is really absent from a lot of different spaces, right? Like, think about a gallery or, you know, some of these like famous galleries, like they had to be the advocate. And right now, every collector has the same voice on X. And I think that that is something, I mean, again, not to like just, these are people that I really admire, right? Like Thor, Samurai Spirit came in, you know, JD Sears, Mr. Merge. I mean, these are all people who are like, you know, new to collecting in the last year or two. Find your group, find your artist that you want to, and like pour your authentic soul into the space. I think that like it's incredible the opportunity that you have as a collector. As an artist, my recommendation is like create and share. You have like literally the greatest feedback loop ever with X. And if you can stomach some of the negative sentiment and not relish too much in the positive sentiment, you're going to see like real-time feedback into your art, and you'll be able to, again, as long as you're creating authentic art and not just trying to like style bite something and like create something for the masses, but like you're doing like authentic artwork on your by yourself. I've seen the rise of like I mean, just this weekend, you know, again, not to just like jump on Modest, they created a piece that had like, it was called Work-Life Balance, and it was like a little girl on a balance beam with a man with a briefcase, right? Now, obviously, here I am wearing a suit and coming from corporate America. It resonated with me because I have 3 boys that like work-life balance is a big thing, but just the amount of engagement. And then he minted it, right? Like that's the best feedback loop. And like people, my timeline this whole weekend was people proud to have this piece in their collection. This, as an artist, is the number one hack. Share it, engage, allow for the community to like give you real-time feedback. And I'm not saying you have to mint everything right away, but you'll be able to fine tune like a style that's going to have like a deeper resonance. And then part 2 of this is send DMs, man. Like as a collector, I'm a builder, but first and foremost, I'm a collector, right? And as a collector, when you get to like connect with an artist, man, there's no better privilege, man. And it's like, you know, I did this in my corporate career. I called it 5-minute phone calls. Like once a day, if you couldn't afford 5 minutes of your time to call somebody and say, appreciate you, thank you. How many times, like if somebody like comes up to you in an authentic way, says like, I see you, I appreciate you, thank you. There's not one person in this world who goes, "Ah, damn that person for reaching out." It just doesn't exist. So like spend the time, take 5 minutes of your day to like send a DM in an authentic fashion to somebody that is on your mind that day. Right? It's you'd be surprised how on a long enough timeline, because again, if you're not going for max value extraction now and you're looking at this as a long-term career, those 5-minute phone calls, those 5-minute engagements, they compound at a way that's going to be like unprecedented. I mean, it's that proverbial butterfly effect. You do a little motion now and it's going to end up being, you know, a hurricane of activity later on. It's a very powerful time.
Thank you for sharing that. Great insights, and also very actionable ones that everyone can start applying today, and no excuse about
I
that.
must say I haven't heard that in a while. Um, sense of like, I don't care if this is happening in the world. We're building this 8 map for the next 20 years. Hello or high water.
I mean,
Good for
It's
you.
and if
Congratulations
you
on
can
that.
see, it's a passion, right? And I'm trying to surround
Yeah.
myself with passionate people. And I just want to have an impact, right? And I think that, like, for me, the inspiration I have is like, I'm going to bring that passion to it. And my core belief is that passion rubs off on people and it becomes contagious. And like that butterfly effect I mentioned earlier, like on a long enough timeline, it will catch.
Thank you very much, Jared.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate the time. You guys have been awesome, and thank you for letting me have my proverbial soapbox to talk through some of the stuff and share my passion. I appreciate not only the time, but everything that you guys are doing in the space, and obviously some of the beautiful art that is creating this deep resonance with people. So, thank you so much for giving me a brief moment of time to share a lot of my thoughts.